Priscilla thought the whispers were just gossip, another rumor in a world built on noise. But one night in Graceland, her voice cut through the silence. "Who's calling you this late, Elvis?" What he confessed next didn't just shake their marriage. It sent shockwaves through every newsroom in America. Graceland, Memphis, Tennessee, January 1972. The clock in the hallway glowed 2:35 a.m. Outside the iron gates, fans were still waiting, wrapped in blankets, clutching signs that read, "We love you, Elvis." Inside, the air felt heavy. A strange kind of quiet that wasn't peace, just waiting. Elvis walked down the carpeted hallway barefoot. A lamp flickered in the corner. The old rotary phone on the dresser blinked once. The red light that always made Priscilla's stomach twist. He stared at it like it might come alive again. It always did. For the world, Elvis Presley was the man who made the crowd scream, who turned music into magic. But behind those blue curtains, in that mansion filled with gold records and perfume, he was a man who couldn't sleep. Loneliness had a sound, and it was the soft click of that phone line. Priscilla stirred awake. She'd gotten used to the strange rhythms of Graceland. Laughter at midnight, songs at dawn, security radios humming through the halls. But tonight felt different. There was no music, no laughter, just silence and that faint ring. She walked quietly to the living room. Elvis was sitting on the couch, elbows on his knees, head down. The phone was pressed to his ear. His eyes looked lost, not guilty, not cruel, just far away, like he was talking to another time, not another person. "Who keeps calling you this late, Elvis?" she asked softly. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. The truth was already heavy in the air. He didn't answer right away. The only sound was the hum of the fridge in the next room and the ticking of the clock on the wall. 2:37 a.m. Outside, one of the fans called his name through the gate. "Elvis, we love you!" He flinched, not from anger, but from exhaustion. He smiled weakly, like he didn't know how to stop being Elvis Presley even for a second. Priscilla stepped closer. "Elvis," she said again. "Who is it?" He put the phone down. Slowly, carefully, like it might explode if he moved too fast. The light from the hallway framed them both. A man in shadow, a woman half in light. She wasn't angry, not yet, just tired. Tired of the endless tours, the long nights, the calls, the looks from people who thought they knew everything. In that silence, you could almost hear the crowd, the cheers, the cameras, the songs that once brought them together, now pushing them apart. Fame had its own gravity. It pulled at everything. Love, truth, even sleep. Elvis rubbed his face with both hands. He whispered something, but the words were too soft to catch. Priscilla waited. She'd waited through every tour, every magazine cover, every just one more show. But she wasn't sure she could wait through another secret. "What would you have done?" the narrator's voice asks quietly. "If the person you loved most kept one part of their life hidden from you, and the world loved that part more than you ever could?" Down the hall, a framed gold record caught the moonlight. A small reflection flickered on the wall, like a ghost of the man he used to be. There was no laughter now, just the distant echo of a song he'd recorded years ago, "Can't Help Falling in Love." Priscilla sat beside him. The room smelled faintly of coffee and cologne. She noticed the way his hands shook, not from anger, but from something deeper. Fear, maybe, or guilt, or the weight of being worshipped by millions and understood by none. "Elvis," she said again. He looked up this time, and for the first time that night, he didn't look like a legend. He looked like a man caught between two worlds. The one the crowd built, and the one that was breaking behind closed doors. The phone rang again, a single sharp ring. They both froze, and that's when the truth began to surface. One ring, one pause, one look too long. No one could have guessed that this moment, in the quiet heart of Graceland, would lead to the confession that made headlines worldwide. Because sometimes the loudest sounds in history start in silence. January 12th, 1972, 2:37 a.m. The red light on the phone blinked again. Once, twice. Then the ring, sharp and lonely, cutting through the stillness of Graceland like a warning. Priscilla's breath caught. "Elvis, if you pick that up, we're done talking." Her voice didn't shake, but her eyes did. He hesitated, hand hovering above the receiver. Outside, the wind pressed against the stained glass window. A portrait of Jesus watched over the room, the glass trembling faintly in the draught. Elvis looked at it for a long moment, maybe hoping for a sign. Then he picked up. "Yeah," he whispered. Pause. The kind of silence that makes your stomach drop. He said a name, too softly for Priscilla to hear, but she recognized it. It was a name she'd seen on gossip pages, one of the dancers from the Vegas residency the summer before. She turned away, arms folded, trying to swallow the noise in her head. Elvis kept talking. His voice was low, heavy, kind. Not the voice he used on stage. Then a laugh. Not loud, just gentle. And that somehow hurt the most. A security guard named Charlie Hodge, half asleep in the hallway, later said he heard something snap inside that room. Not glass, not wood, something human. When Elvis finally hung up, Priscilla was staring at the floor. She didn't cry. She just said, "You can't keep living two lives, Elvis." He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. He walked to the piano and sat down. The lid creaked. He played a single chord, C major, the same note that opened Love Me Tender. Then he whispered, "I don't even know which one's real anymore." The phone rang again. He didn't touch it this time. He just stared, eyes unfocused as the sound filled the room. 4 rings, then silence. A chill rolled through the house like a wave. Somewhere a clock struck 3. Priscilla stepped closer. "Who was it, Elvis?" He whispered, "Someone who remembers who I used to be." She didn't understand. Not yet. The legend the world adored was cracking from the inside. One quiet confession at a time. Fame had turned into a mirror, and he couldn't tell which reflection was the real man anymore. He stood up suddenly. The bench screeched against the tile. "Do you know what it's like," he said, "to have everyone want a piece of you, and still feel invisible?" The words came out raw, almost angry, then softer. "They only call when the music stops." Priscilla felt a lump rise in her throat. He wasn't talking about the dancer anymore. He was talking about the weight of adoration, the endless applause that never filled the silence after. She asked quietly, "And what about me? When the music stops, who do you call?" Elvis looked at her, eyes wet but steady. "That's just it, baby. I don't know anymore." Outside, a guard's radio crackled. All clear at the gate. A dog barked once, then silence again. For a moment she saw the man she'd fallen in love with, shy, polite, full of wonder. Then the flashbulb memory faded, replaced by the tired figure standing before her, half in shadow. The ring of the phone still echoed in her chest. If love could survive fame, it had to survive the truth. But what if the truth itself was the thing fame destroyed first? In that quiet, something changed between them. Invisible, irreversible. He reached for her hand, but she stepped back. The distance between them wasn't measured in feet anymore. It was measured in secrets. He whispered, almost pleading, "Don't let them take me away from you." She shook her head. "They already did." And just like that, the call ended, but the silence began to speak louder than ever. A diary entry from one of the housekeepers later surfaced. Mrs. Presley didn't sleep that night. She stood by the window until dawn, watching the fans at the gate. At 6:04 a.m., Elvis walked onto the balcony. The first light hit his face. Cameras from the street caught the shadow of him standing alone. No smile, no wave. Just stillness. That photo appeared in papers the next day under the headline, "The King Awake Before Sunrise." But why? They didn't know what had really happened inside those walls. Not yet. Because the next night, the phone would ring again. And this time, Elvis wouldn't answer it alone. Graceland, the following night. A storm rolled in from the Mississippi River, wind brushing the magnolia trees until the branches tapped against the windows like impatient fingers. Inside, the house felt colder than usual. Not from the weather, but from everything left unsaid. Elvis sat at the piano again. The same song, the same lonely chord. Down the hall, Priscilla's suitcase lay half-packed on the bed. A scarf slipped out of it, one he'd given her during the 1969 comeback show, the year everyone thought they'd found their way back to each other. But tonight, it looked like that story was ending. Jerry Schilling, one of Elvis's oldest friends, stood by the doorway, unsure if he should speak. He'd been called in earlier, not to protect Elvis from fans, but from himself. The king wasn't angry. He was unraveling. "Jerry," Elvis said quietly, "you ever feel like the whole world's got you surrounded, and somehow you're still alone?" Jerry didn't answer. He'd learned long ago that sometimes silence was the safest reply. Down the hallway, Priscilla's voice cut through the thunder. "I'm tired of being another room in your life, Elvis." She wasn't shouting. She didn't need to. Every word was steady, deliberate, and final. He stood up. Slowly. The piano stool scraped the floor again, a sound that felt too loud in the emptiness. "I never meant to hurt you, Scylla," he said, voice low. I don't know how to stop needing all of it. The stage, the lights, the people." She looked at him for a long time, then said, "And what happens when the people go home?" A flash of lightning flooded the room white for a split second. In that light, they didn't look like icons, just two exhausted souls trapped inside the world they'd built. Priscilla took a deep breath. "You think you're lonely because of fame, but you were lonely long before the music started." That hit him harder than any headline ever could. He turned away, eyes glistening. Outside, the wind howled through the gates. A fan's letter, dropped earlier that day, was caught in the storm and pressed against the fence. In bold handwriting, it read, "We'll always love you, Elvis." He stared at that letter through the glass. Maybe that was the problem. The world's love was endless, and yet somehow never enough. He punched the piano keys. One harsh, discordant sound that echoed through the hall, then silence again. He whispered, "I give everything out there, and still feel empty in here." Priscilla stepped closer. "Then maybe it's time you learn to give what's left to yourself." He laughed softly, a sad, broken laugh. "If I stop being Elvis Presley, who am I?" That line hung in the air, thick as smoke. Jerry finally spoke. "Maybe that's what scares you, that you don't know anymore." Elvis didn't answer. He just stared at his own reflection in the piano lid. A distorted, doubled version of himself. The man and the myth staring each other down. Thunder cracked again. The chandelier above them swayed slightly. Priscilla turned toward the staircase, suitcase in hand. "Elvis, please," he said. But she kept walking. "What would you have said, watching the person who built your world walk away, knowing you might have built the cage yourself?" She paused halfway up the stairs. "I used to love the man who sang love songs," she whispered. "Now I just hear the echo." And then she was gone. The sound of the door closing blending with the thunder outside. Elvis sank back to the piano. His fingers found the same chord again, softer this time. He began to hum, not for the crowd, not for the record, just to fill the silence she'd left behind. Jerry stood by the wall, unsure what to do. He glanced at the clock. 3:03 a.m., the same hour as the night before. History repeating itself in quiet misery. Elvis pressed one key over and over until the note faded into nothing. Then he whispered something no one expected. "I don't deserve her." That admission wasn't made for forgiveness. It was the sound of surrender. For the first time in his career, Elvis wasn't performing. He was confessing to the empty room, to the portrait on the wall, maybe to himself. Outside, the storm broke. Rain hit the roof in hard sheets. The lights flickered once, then steadied. Jerry left him alone, closing the door softly behind him. From the hallway, he heard Elvis whisper again, barely audible. "Lord, help me be a better man." But the Lord didn't answer, just the thunder, rolling farther and farther away. A guard on night duty later said he heard the piano stop at exactly 3:27 a.m. Then nothing, until a single phone ring echoed again through the house. This time, no one picked up. March 3rd, 1972. Graceland felt like a museum before it ever became one. Every hallway smelled of cologne and loneliness. The storm was gone, but its silence stayed behind. Elvis hadn't slept in 2 days. He wandered room to room in his robe, the sound of his own footsteps the only company he had left. Priscilla had moved into a guest room down the hall. No one spoke about it, but everyone felt it. Charlie Hodge brought him coffee at dawn. "Thanks, brother," Elvis said, voice raspy. He looked at the cup, then at the telephone again. That same one from the night of the call. The line was silent now, but the red light still blinked intermittently, as if mocking him with its memory. What do you confess to when the whole world already thinks it owns your truth? He sat at the kitchen table with a notepad. No lyrics this time. Just words crossed out, rewritten and crossed out again. Priscilla walked in, hair tied back, eyes red from lack of sleep. She didn't ask how he was. She just said, "You need to stop running from the quiet." Elvis looked up slowly. "I don't sleep alone," he said flatly. The words hung there, like smoke that wouldn't clear. She blinked. "I know," she whispered. But it wasn't about the phone calls anymore. He stood, restless. When the music stops, the voices come back. The crowds, the applause, Mama calling my name from the back of the church. I hear it all when it's quiet. He took a deep breath. They don't call because they love me. They call because they don't want me to disappear. Priscilla's eyes softened. "Then what do you want?" He paused. "To feel like a man again, not a headline." The sun hit the curtains, casting striped light across the floor. Every shadow looked like bars, Graceland as a gilded cage. Priscilla sat opposite him. For a moment, there was no sound except the ticking clock and the hiss of the coffee pot. Then she asked, "Elvis, if you had to choose, the music or me, which would you save?" He smiled sadly. "That's like asking me to choose between breathing and dreaming." She looked away. Tears didn't fall yet, but they waited. He took a step closer. "I talk to them at night because they remind me I still exist. When I hang up, the silence kills me." Her voice broke. "So I wasn't enough," he whispered. "It wasn't you I was losing. It was me." Shock burst. Moment of silence, then short lines. He sat down, head in hands, a grown man crying in his own castle. Outside, the gardener started his truck. The sound echoed like applause from a ghost crowd. Elvis flinched. He whispered again, "I don't sleep alone, even when you're here." Priscilla reached for his hand, then stopped mid-motion. Maybe she realized some distances can't be closed by touch. She left the room without a word. Elvis watched her go, lips pressed together, teeth white against the dark. He turned to the window and saw his own reflection staring back. "Guess we're both stuck here," he muttered. Later that day, he recorded a demo in the Jungle Room. A slow, unreleased ballad fans would later find on a bootleg tape titled The Midnight Confession. No orchestra, just Elvis and a microphone, his voice cracking as he sang, "I don't sleep alone, I just pretend I do." The tape survived. It's rumoured to sit in a locked drawer in the Graceland archive room. Never officially released, never forgotten. Can a legend ask for forgiveness and still remain a legend? By nightfall, the house was quiet again. Elvis walked back to the front door, opened it, and looked at the fans still waiting outside. Some had been there for days. He smiled faintly, then closed the door. Inside, he whispered, almost to himself, "I just want to feel real again." That line would later appear in Priscilla's diary. He was trapped between love and loneliness. I could save one, not both. A plaque near the piano today reads, "In this room, the king was just a man." Most visitors don't know what it means, but those who do, they stand a little longer listening for a ghost chord still ringing in the air. Because that night, Elvis Presley finally told the truth. Not to the world, but to himself, and it hurt more than any song he ever sang. October 9th, 1973, Los Angeles County Courthouse. Cameras flashed so fast they sounded like rainfall. Reporters shouted questions that neither of them answered. Elvis held the door for Priscilla, the same hand that once held a microphone now trembling just slightly. She smiled for the crowd, not out of joy, but mercy. Inside, the papers were ready. One signature and a decade of history would become a headline. Back in Memphis, fans gathered outside Graceland. They sang softly through the gates, gospel harmonies drifting into the night. No one knew what to say, so they did the only thing they could. They sang "Love Me Tender." Inside the courtroom, Elvis leaned over and whispered, "You'll always be the mother of my little girl." Priscilla nodded. "And you'll always be the man who tried to love the whole world." That line wasn't meant for reporters, but a boom mic caught it anyway. The next morning, it ran in the papers under the headline, "Elvis and Priscilla, Love in Past Tense." What happens when the fairy tale ends, but the spotlight won't dim? When they stepped outside, fans cheered. It wasn't cruelty, it was confusion. How could two people who looked perfect on posters come apart so quietly? Elvis walked to his car without a bodyguard for the first time in years. He paused, looked back once, then disappeared behind tinted glass. Priscilla stood for a moment longer, hands clasped, eyes dry. She had cried enough. That night, Jerry Schilling called to check in. "She okay?" Elvis asked. Jerry hesitated. "Yeah." "She's strong?" Elvis sighed. "She always was." The next tour began weeks later. Las Vegas Hilton, November 14th, 1973. Nearly 20,000 people packed the room. Elvis stepped onto the stage, white jumpsuit, gold belt, smile ready. But when he opened his mouth to sing, his voice cracked on the first note. He closed his eyes and whispered, "Sorry, y'all." The crowd roared anyway. He looked out across the sea of faces. They still loved him, but love wasn't the problem anymore. Loneliness was. Between songs, he glanced at the front row. Empty seat where she used to sit. He nodded to the band, forcing a grin. "Let's take it from the top." The cameras caught everything. The sweat, the smile, the slight tremor in his hand as he held the mic. He looked like a king, but that night, he felt like a ghost. Pattern breaker. Short shock line. The king of rock and roll couldn't feel his own heartbeat. After the show, he sat alone in the dressing room, makeup half washed, scarf around his neck, a fan's note in his pocket. It read, "You helped me through my divorce. Thank you." He stared at it for a long time before whispering, "Guess we're both learning." Outside, reporters waited by the back door. When he finally stepped out, someone shouted, "Elvis, how are you holding up?" He paused, then said quietly, "One day at a time." That clip aired on national television. People called it grace. It was really exhaustion. How do you heal when the world keeps watching the wound? Priscilla returned to Memphis weeks later, so Lisa Marie could spend Christmas at Graceland. They exchanged polite smiles, careful distance. When Elvis handed Priscilla a wrapped box, a locket with a photo of all three of them, she whispered, "You still remember?" He nodded. "I always will." That was the last Christmas they spent under the same roof. But in the photos, they're still smiling. Proof that sometimes kindness survives even when love doesn't. A housekeeper later said she found a note on the piano after they left. "To Scylla, thank you for loving the man beneath the crown." No one knows if he meant to send it. It's framed quietly in a corner of the Graceland archives today. Elvis walked the empty halls that night, scarf still in hand. He touched the keys once more, whispering, "It's all right, baby." Outside, the fans still waited. They always would, because even as the king lost his marriage, he never lost the crowd. And maybe that was the cruelest part of all. Graceland, decades later. The gates still hum with the low buzz of cameras and whispers. Tourists press their hands against the iron bars as if touch might close the distance between myth and man. Inside, the air smells of furniture polish and memory. Down the hall, the piano still sits beneath the chandelier that once shook during the storm. A plaque reads, "In this room, the king was just a man." Priscilla visits quietly now. No flashbulbs, no crowd, just her footsteps and the echo of a voice that will never fade. She pauses by the balcony where he once stood at sunrise, watching fans sing through the fog. Sometimes she smiles, sometimes she whispers, "Morning, Elvis." A young guide points to the rotary phone behind the glass and says, "That's the one from the stories." Visitors lean closer. No one knows if the story is true, but everyone feels like it is. In a display case near the exit lies a ticket stub, a bootleg tape, and a handwritten note. "I don't sleep alone." The ink has faded, but the ache remains. What if the world's brightest lights only exist to show us how fragile we are in the dark? Outside, fans still leave letters. Some to Elvis, some to Priscilla. Most to love itself. You taught us that kindness isn't weak. You proved forgiveness can outlive fame. Every August 16th, the candles return. Thousands of tiny flames lining the driveway. People stand in silence as the wind moves through the trees, and for a moment, it feels like he's still singing from somewhere inside the house. Priscilla once said in an interview, "He needed love more than anyone I've ever met." And maybe that's the real truth of it all, the one no headline ever captured. He wasn't a king seeking a throne. He was a man searching for a home in his own heart. The camera fades on the Graceland gates at dusk. A guitar chord rises softly, and somewhere between the notes, you can still hear her say, "I forgave him." Behind every headline is a heartbeat. Elvis didn't lose love. He lost himself trying to keep it alive. And maybe that's the cost of being seen by everyone, but known by no one. If this story moved you, share it with someone who believes in forgiveness. Because some legends never end. They just turn into lessons.